Tariffs shape the cost of nearly everything we buy, yet most people never see them directly. They're hidden in the final price tag, an invisible toll collected long before checkout. Hello, and welcome to FluxFolio Finance. Let's look at what a tariff really is. It's a border tax on imported goods. When a product enters a country, the importer pays that tax immediately. This cost then works its way through the economy. Retailers raise prices to maintain their margins, and by the time it lands in a store, you, the consumer, pay it in full. Even though the term tariff sounds technical, its impact is anything but abstract. It's the extra dollars on your grocery bill, the reason an imported appliance costs more, the subtle shift in your budget as prices adjust across entire categories of goods. This mechanism was thrown into the spotlight during the Trump administration. In 2018, the U.S. imposed sweeping tariffs, 25% on imported steel and 10% on aluminum. These weren't targeted at one country alone. They hit allies like Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. But the real target was China. Over $360 billion worth of Chinese goods were covered by new tariffs. China retaliated with tariffs on $110 billion of American exports, including soybeans, cars, electronics, and farm equipment. This created an environment often described as a trade war, even though it didn't involve soldiers or bombs. The idea behind these tariffs was to correct what the administration saw as an unfair imbalance. The goal was to pressure China to change trade practices and to protect U.S. industries from foreign competition. But tariffs are a blunt tool. When the U.S. government imposes a tariff, it doesn't send China a bill. Importers pay at the border. They pass that cost on to wholesalers, who pass it to retailers, who finally raise prices for customers. Studies by the Federal Reserve showed that these costs were largely borne by American consumers. It wasn't an abstract burden on foreign suppliers. It was an average of about $800 extra per year for the typical U.S. household, spread across higher prices for everything from clothes to electronics to household goods. At the same time, some American industries benefited. Steel mills reopened idle furnaces. Certain factories secured new orders. Tariffs provided breathing room for domestic production that had long been under pressure from cheaper imports. But those benefits were uneven and often short-lived. Manufacturers that depended on imported steel or aluminum for parts faced higher costs. Automakers and appliance producers watched their margins shrink or passed on higher prices to consumers. Farmers were hit hard. China slashed purchases of U.S. soybeans, turning instead to Brazil. Prices collapsed. Even with federal aid to help farmers survive, the damage to long-term trade relationships was real. The tariffs also strained alliances. Canada and Mexico responded with their own retaliatory tariffs. The European Union drafted lists of American goods it would target. Long-standing trade partners were forced into a new role as adversaries in a tit-for-tat cycle. Diplomatically, it wasn't just about economics. It signaled that the U.S. was willing to use trade policy aggressively, even at the expense of traditional allies. By 2020, the Trump administration and China reached a Phase 1 agreement. China pledged to increase purchases of American goods, and some tariffs were reduced, but many stayed in place. And when Joe Biden took office in 2021, he chose not to remove most of these tariffs. The strategy shifted from being a Trump policy to a bipartisan approach justified by concerns over trade imbalances, intellectual property, and geopolitical tensions. So what does this mean for ordinary people? It means that the trucks delivering goods to stores pay more at the port. Importers adjust orders. Retailers make tough choices about whether to absorb costs or raise prices. Consumers see it in their receipts, often without realizing why. A tariff isn't an obvious line item like sales tax. It's hidden, but it shapes what you can afford, what's available on shelves, and how businesses plan for the future. It can be a protective measure for certain industries while punishing others with higher costs. It can help a steel millers in Pennsylvania while forcing a car plant to pay more for parts. It can give leverage in negotiations with trade partners while risking long-term relationships and stability. And it's not just about the US. When the US raises tariffs on imports, other countries often respond. Retaliation cycles develop. Global supply chains get disrupted. Prices rise not just for final goods, but for components that travel across multiple borders before assembly. What looks like a simple policy lever, taxing imports to protect domestic jobs, turns into a complex economic chain reaction. Because tariffs don't pay themselves, importers pay first. They pass the cost to wholesalers. Retailers pass it to customers. The customer pays last and pays the most. That's the real story behind tariffs. Tariffs don't just increase costs at home. They create ripples across the entire global economy. When one country raises barriers, its trading partners often respond. This back and forth isn't just theory. It's been the reality of modern trade disputes. Consider what happens when the US imposes broad tariffs on imported machinery or electronics. Producers in countries like Germany or Japan see demand dip or face sudden price disadvantages. Their factories must adjust, often by cutting costs or laying off workers. In turn, these countries might impose their own tariffs on US goods. Agricultural exports like soybeans and corn are common targets. Farmers in the American Midwest feel the pain directly as orders evaporate. A coffee farmer in Brazil may not see a tariff on his beans directly, but tariffs on imported machinery from Europe raise his production costs. The higher price of equipment cuts into profits. When importers abroad pay more for his coffee, they pass the cost along the chain, making it harder for him to compete. An assembly plant in Germany faces higher costs on auto parts imported from Japan because of layered tariffs, 5%, 10%, sometimes more. Margins shrink. Management debates relocating production, laying off workers, or renegotiating supplier contracts. In China, policymakers watch tariff announcements from the US closely. They calculate targeted retaliation, taxes on American soybeans, dairy, airplanes. Each move is deliberate, a calculated response designed to hit politically sensitive industries. The result is a cycle. Tariff, retaliation, tariff. Markets react. Stock indices wobble. Growth projections get revised downward. Economists warn of stagflation, a toxic mix of slowing growth and persistent price increases. This isn't the first time the world has seen such patterns. History offers a cautionary tale in the form of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. Passed during the Great Depression, it raised US tariffs to historic highs. Other countries retaliated. Exports dried up. Global trade contracted sharply, deepening and prolonging the economic crisis. Today's policymakers know that history. They debate, caution, and strategize to avoid repeating it. But the pressures to protect domestic industries and punish unfair trading partners remain strong. Tariffs often sound appealing in political speeches. Protect local jobs. Make trade fair. But they act as walls rather than bridges. Walls cast shadows over economies. They discourage investment. They force companies to navigate complex and costly supply chains. They reduce the flow of ideas, technology, and goods. And walls have echoes. A tariff introduced today can provoke retaliation tomorrow. Even once removed, the damage to relationships and supply chains can linger for years. Tariffs are a gamble. Policymakers bet that the protection offered to certain industries is worth the higher prices paid by everyone else. They bet that the pressure applied to foreign governments will yield concessions without permanent damage. But these bets don't always pay off. In grocery stores, workers field questions about why staples cost more. They explain that shipping is pricier, feed for livestock is more expensive, packaging materials cost more, all factors connected to tariffs in ways many consumers don't see. Stock traders monitor tariff headlines closely. News of a new round of duties can send steel stocks plunging, then bouncing back on rumors of delays or negotiations. Volatility becomes a feature, not a bug. Young people scrolling social media see memes comparing the prices of US and foreign-made products, sparking debate and awareness in unexpected places. Inflation data reveals the truth. Groceries, appliances, smartphones all get caught in the web of tariff-driven price increases. Economists warn that these hidden taxes hit hardest for those with the least room in their budgets. Trade wars don't have battlefields, but they have casualties. A teacher may find classroom supplies cost more. A factory owner may face pricier imported components. An exporter may lose an entire overseas market because of retaliatory tariffs. Some industries do benefit. Domestic steel mills may see a resurgence. Certain manufacturing sectors regain a competitive edge. But these wins are often narrow, temporary, and come at the cost of broader economic pain. Policymakers discuss alternatives and targeted subsidies to support key industries without raising costs on everything else. In strategic alliances to negotiate fairer trade without resorting to blanket tariffs. Transition assistance for displaced workers, helping them shift to new roles as economies evolve. Trade agreements designed to set clear rules while cushioning partners from sudden shocks. Tariffs remain part of the policy toolkit. They're unlikely to disappear entirely, but how they're used and how their costs are shared matters. Because in the end, tariffs are paid by someone. 1. Importers pay the border tax. 2. Wholesalers absorb higher costs. 3. Retailers adjust prices. 4. Consumers pay more at checkout. 5. Exporters lose markets to retaliation. 6. Economic growth slows under uncertainty. Each step in this chain transforms an abstract policy choice into a real human impact. Tariffs shape not just trade balances, but daily lives, purchasing power, and economic stability. They are a policy with real costs and real consequences. Thank you for joining us at FluxFolio Finance. If you found this valuable, subscribe for more clear-eyed looks at the forces shaping your wallet and the world economy. Until next time.